This is Wanda Stutsman. I'm a Tarrant County Master Gardener, and I'm excited to teach you all a little bit about spring bulbs. I know that a lot of us are not thinking about spring bulbs. Our bulbs here in Texas tend to bloom anywhere from January to this time of year. We often don't think about planting them at this time of year, but this is the optimum time of year to select our spring bulbs and get those in the ground before our winter so that they have time to chill in the ground before they bloom here in Texas. And so today I would just like to share with you what little I know about bulbs, and hopefully you'll walk away with some good information. Spring bulbs, what I like to say about spring bulbs is that they are a surprise in the garden, and we often forget where we plant them in the garden, and then come January, when we get a chance to go outside, we find little sprouts coming up in places we had forgotten. And soon after that, you'll have a daffodil in bloom. And even though daffodils in the north are considered a spring bloom, here they really do bloom in the winter. There are multiple bulb types. Let's talk about two particular types. There's the tunicate bulb and the non-tunicate bulb. And here I have some illustrations of both. A bulb is defined as a plant that contains everything that it needs for its entire life cycle in its root structure. Nutrients, everything that it needs is there. The tunicate bulb is probably the most popular, is when you see a lot in the big box stores for sale. Those are going to cover your onions, your amaryllis, your narcissus, the daffodils, and the paper whites. Here is an example of an onion, and you can see the tunic is the protective layer here at the top of the onion. You have scales. The bud is here in the middle. It's very hard to see. And then there's a stem right next to it. And then there is the basal plate and the roots. So all together, the bulb is the whole product of the plant. Again, let's talk about the allium plants, which are in the onion family, the amaryllis, and the daffodils all fall in these tunicate bulb styles. A non-tunicate bulb is a bulb that was lacking the tunicate. It's mostly in the lily family, and you will see that there is no protective scaling on the outside. And we're going to talk about a few of these as we move forward in the presentation. What is considered a bulb? A true bulb has a basal plate, as I mentioned earlier, and here in this picture you can see the basal plate. Has roots coming from the basal plate, has plump scales, oftentimes looking like garlic cloves, and then it has a shoot that comes up the middle, followed by leaves that will produce after the shoot comes up. So other types of bulbs, rhizomes, yes, irises are bulbs, and cannas are bulbs, but they're different. They are not deep in the ground. They're horizontal on the surface of the soil, and they do not have a basal plate, or they do not have tunics. Corms are very similar to a true bulb, and many people will confuse the two. However, that they're not going to have the same storage structure that a true bulb will have, and there's no visible rings or scaling inside of a corm. Tubers and tuberous roots, there's no basal plate, there's no tunic. Caladiums, potatoes, dahlias are in this family, and we cannot grow dahlias in Texas very well. We don't get an exposure to dahlias, but many of you who have moved here from other places may have grown dahlias and enjoyed growing those, but they are also a bulb, but they're in the tuber and tuberous root family. How to propagate bulbs. Bulbs are really unique in that they will throw seed, and they will divide through bubblets or offsets that are on the side of the bulb. And so it's two ways that they themselves will propagate. And then if a human wants to force propagation, they'll collect seeds and or dig bulbs up and separate the bulblets from the bulb. So for division, you simply dig up a clump of bulbs, hoping not to dig close to the bulbs because you don't want to put your shovel through a bulb. So I typically will dig the whole clump up and then carefully separate them. And I'm going to demonstrate that to you shortly when we talk about a particular type of bulb. And you separate the babies. And in some clumps, you may only have 10 bulbs and with a few bulbets. And in other clumps that have been in the ground for years, you may have hundreds. And so be prepared what you're going to do with all of those individual plants and bulbs when you divide them. A lot of people give them away. And in fact, a very interesting story is that the daffodil was one of the plants that the settlers could share with each other. And they were very, very hardy. And I grew up in East Tennessee near Cades Cove. And I don't know if any of you all have traveled there. It's a beautiful cove within the mountains. And there's a drive around. And if you go in the springtime, you will see daffodils growing out in the middle of the field. Those daffodils are where an old homestead was. The daffodils have lived for hundreds of years, or 100+ years, since the first settlers came to the cove, and they are still growing and blooming out in the field where their homesteads were. So that's kind of a marker. If you ever get a chance to go up there, it's really unique. So about division, the offset of a bulb will have the exact DNA of the parent. And seeds, you can capture the seeds in the dried seed pod. Make sure that you allow the seed pod to dry on the plant. Timing is important. If you capture the seed pod before it dries out, the seeds will not be viable. And if you wait until the seed pod has opened, many of the seeds will have dropped to the ground. Here is a daffodil. This is where the seed pod is on the daffodil, right behind the flower on the stem. Now, so this one is not a viable at this time. This is too green. It needs to be brown, ready to pop open the seed pod. Seeds, however, are not guaranteed to be identical to the parent bulb. They could have possibly gotten pollinated through another plant, cross-pollinated with another plant that's close by. So if you have multiple varieties of daffodils growing in your yard and you have bees that carry the pollen between the plants, that would cause the seed possibly to not have the same DNA. Another way to propagate bulbs, and this is something that the average homeowner is not going to do, but if you come across a very special bulb that maybe you have that you want to share with your friends, you can do a bulb chipping. You have to do a lot of research on this, but you actually take the bulb and you, from the basal cell, the bottom of the bulb, you would slice the bulb in 6 to 12 sections, depending on the size of the bulb. And here's a picture of slices of bulbs, and they're laying in vermiculite. Each portion has to have a part of the basal plate, and it'd be ideal if they each had their own root structure. You then take the sliced bulb and you put it in a fungicide and for 15 to 20 minutes, and then take them out of the fungicide and put them in the vermiculite. These bulbs will take 6 months to a year to form. Other ways of reproducing bulbs is by scooping, where you scoop out the center of the basal plate, scoring, where you are almost bulb chipping, but you're just scoring the bulb in 4 or 6 sections and putting it back in the ground and forcing it to make its 4 to 6 bulbs. And so those are all interesting ways to propagate bulbs. I enjoy just digging them up and separating the offsets from the main bulb. Bulbils, something we don't see a lot in our area. However, you will see them on garlic, possibly alum. The little bulbs on the head of garlic when it's gone to flower. And then on a tiger lily or Asiatic lily, sometimes you'll see these bulbils right at the stem of the where the stem and the leaf come together. And then those will drop to the ground, grow. Planting bulbs. Everybody often wonders, well, how deep do I plant this bulb? The depth of the bulb really does matter. Each bulb type will have an optimal planting depth. Too shallow and the bulb may freeze or rot. Too deep and the bulb may not know when to bloom. The warm soil triggers the bulb to bloom. And so as the winter fades and the sun shines on the ground, it's a trigger to the bulb to start sending shoots up. And that's why we see daffodils sometimes in January here, because we can have some very warm days in January and the bulbs are all like, oh, it's time to shoot our bloom up. Then we get a snow or a freeze afterwards. And daffodils are pretty hardy to freezes, possibly not multiple day freezes, but they're pretty hardy to a light freeze here in Texas. Larger bulbs may need depth for stability, like crinum lilies, things like that, that are very large bulbs. Obviously, you have to dig a big hole in order to get the whole bulb in the ground. And some bulbs, as we'll talk about, will actually creep deeper as they age in the ground. They'll, you may have planted them at 4 inches and then now they may be at 6 inches. The rule of thumb, if you don't want to Google it, is 2 to 3 times the height of the bulb. And I will tell you that this does matter because I planted some oxblood lilies and the soil was really hard to dig in and I barely got the bulb covered. And those that I barely covered are not producing this year. So do try to get the right depth for your bulbs. So let's talk about a tulip. Tulips are a wonderful spring flowering bulb. They're not long-lived as far as the bloom goes, but in mass, they can make a substantial impression of your yard. There are particular tulips that do better in Texas than others, and definitely do your research on tulips before you purchase them. The best time to plant tulips is September and October, and a lot of people do like to chill their tulips. Tulips really do like a long duration of cool weather. The one important thing that I learned about tulips is that after they bloom, you'll want to cut those spent blooms off, not the foliage. Some companion plants for tulips, and let's talk about what a companion plant is. Companion planting is things that will accentuate the look of a plant, the colors complement each other, their root structures don't interfere with each other, they are height and size-wise complement each other. So plant something in between the tulips, things like columbine, candy tuft, creeping phlox, some daylilies. Those will actually hide the spent blooms and the foliage of the tulip and create another look for your garden after the tulips are gone. Let's talk about daffodils. There's so many different types of daffodils, and some of these are ones that our Master Gardener Association has sold, and many of them are in my garden. The Narcissus Salome is a very reliable daffodil. The bloom is about 4 inches across. It has a peach center with little white petals. Very, very pretty. Makes a great complement to your garden in the early spring. Sweetness, this one is a lot smaller daffodil and it blooms in mid-spring, flowers about 2.5 inches across. Now, if you visualize 2.5 inches, it's not very large. And sometimes I've purchased bulbs and put them in the ground, and when they did bloom, I'm like, well, that's not much of a flower. And so I've not paid attention to the flower size as much as just the way that looks in a picture when I have seen it. So, so do pay attention to that if you want a lot of show. The Salome would be quite showy. The sweetness will just be a speck of yellow in your garden. The Rip Van Winkle here is a really unique daffodil. It doesn't even appear to look like a daffodil. It has all of these multi-petals around it, so very fluffy, and it thrives in full sun. That's something that would be really pretty to add as an accent. This Tazetta is a Golden Dawn. This one's neat because it has multiple blooms per stem, and it sometimes can have like 3 to 4 blooms per stem. And it has a very, very pretty center. and it is very fragrant. Let me show you this picture here. And this are daffodil bulbs I dug up in my yard the other day. And you can see the offsets right here. You can see the offset off of the main bulb. And so that offset is going to bloom this spring in my garden. The paper whites, they're beautiful. And a lot of people bring them in and force them for the winter holidays. And they just make a beautiful arrangement with an amaryllis. They do have an odor to them. Some people love the odor, and then some people don't really tolerate it very well. I put some of these in my garden, and every time I would walk past on the driveway, I would catch a whiff of them, and I would look for animal feces. So to me, they have a very strong odor, and to others, they may not. So you might want to check that out before you bring them in the house. This is the most popular paper white. It's the Ziva, and again, they make a beautiful display in the winter and easily can be forced. They grow in minimal water. I put them in a big vase that's tall that will support them, because these will get tall. They'll get about 18 inches tall. And then just put some rocks in the bottom with some water. What you do want to make sure is that they don't mold. And that's important, because then the water will begin to smell. So let's talk about amaryllis. We all love these. They're just gorgeous. And we think about them in the winter. But a lot of people don't think that they will grow in the ground here in Texas, but they do. And I have them in several places. The places that I've planted them that are now more shade, the plant doesn't bloom nearly as well as it would if it got more sun. Now they're going to bloom when the trees are just putting on their leaves. And again, they could be under deciduous trees, and they will bloom. In my particular area, I have overhangs from my house that are keeping the sun away from them. So I need to dig them up and move them. They are hardy to about 10 degrees Fahrenheit. So if we had multiple days of 20-degree weather here in Texas, they will survive. Again, planted at the right depth. You can see here in this picture, we have a little bulblet coming out. And then here it's a little bit larger. And then here is the big, beautiful bloom. And what I brought today was one I just dug out of my yard, and I'm going to switch from sharing to camera, and I'm going to show you what it looks like when you pull it out of the ground. So here we have the plant, and I dug it up. I haven't looked at it. I haven't uncovered it, the soil from it. But you can see that it has an offshoot here and an offshoot here. And we are going to pull the soil away from the roots. Hopefully you all can see this just fine. I'm making just a huge mess, but that's what we gardeners do. So you can see that these bulbettes have come right off of the basal plate of the, look at all these amazing roots. And you can see where it's come right off the basal plate. And if I tug just a little bit, I've pulled it away. Let me put this one over to the side. And you can see there is a little scar, a little wound, but that should heal up. And look at these amazing roots. So I could, if I really love this, now remember, this is going to have the exact same DNA as the parent. So if this was one of my most favorite in my garden, and I wanted to share, I would take this and then plant it in a pot and then nurture it. And in a couple of years, it would be mature enough to bloom. So that is how easy that is. Now, what I will do is I would take the parent bulb back home, and I will plant it back in the ground. And I can take the offset and I can plant it um, back in the ground a little bit further away from the parent. So let's go back to our presentation. Amaryllis can definitely be forced in the winter, and then once they are through after the holidays, you can plant them in the ground. So let's talk about the giant snowflake. Is just a beautiful addition to a garden, and this is a different type of bulb than a daffodil or an amaryllis or a tulip. And so you may want to consider branching out and putting different types of bulbs in. These bulbs will last just a little, bloom will last just a little longer than a daffodil. And now this one is the giant snowflake, and it's not to be confused with the snowdrop. They're very similar, but the snowflake is a taller variety. Now both the snowdrop and the snowflake would prefer a more moist soil. So if you have some moist soil conditions, consider these in your garden. And I just think the little bells on the plant are just so amazing with these little green dots. It's just really pretty addition to the garden. Spanish bluebells. I have these in my garden and absolutely love them. They multiply very quickly. They're a very small bulb, and you can see here there's a quarter, and you can see that these bulbs here are not much bigger than that, but that little bulb will produce a nice plant. And then they multiply in the garden. They throw their seeds. This is a seed pod here. And I will tell you that these are not my bulbs. I went out to try to dig up bulbs for this. The Spanish bluebell is the one that has the contractile root, and that root will actually drive the bulb deeper into the ground. So where I thought I could just sort of stick my hand in the ground and pull out some bulbs, I was fishing around there and I couldn't find any bulbs. And I know that is the exact spot where my huge clump of Spanish bluebells are. So I did not go and get a shovel to dig deeper to pull them out, but they're there. And they've been there 4 or 5 years, and so they are further in the ground than when I planted them. Easily to divide, and these I think I would probably try to divide after they bloom, before their foliage disappears. Now their foliage will completely disappear by summer, and so you will forget where they are. Grape hyacinth. Super sweet little plant. This is tiny. There are a lot of varieties of muscari. The common one that we see around here that grows wild a lot is a grape hyacinth. It's a tiny little thing. The bulb, the flower shoot will only be about 4 to 5 inches. It's you almost have to look for it. Here are 2 bulbs I pulled out of the ground at my house to show you what they look like. Again, here's a shovel head right next to them that's about 6 inches long. So you can see that these are just tiny. Here's a picture of the green growth coming up. What's neat about these plants is that the green growth will come, or these bulbs, is that the green growth comes up in the fall. So you have a spot of green in your garden throughout the winter. And I love them, and I'm hoping that they'll just continue to multiply along a border for me. A friend of mine gave me 200 bulbs or more, and I'm going to tell you that those did not go very far because they were tiny little bulbs, some of them the size of a pinhead, and she had just dug them all out of a yard. They were in the middle of a grass area, and she dug them all out of this and just gave me bags full of them. There might have been 500 of them in there, I don't know, but there were tiny, tiny little ones, and the biggest one was no bigger than a dime. And I planted them in clumps along a border, and I'll probably be 100 by the time they're fill in. So I'll have to maybe find some more and add to them. But anyhow, beautiful little bulb, and adds quite the accent. And then there are other muscari that grow bigger, and you may want to seek some of those out. Alum are a sweet addition to a garden. A lot of them will grow tall. The alum is in the onion family, so it has a scented bulb, and in some cases it's more scented than others. Some varieties are more scented than others. So here's this picture over here on the side has, it's more of like a garlic shaped bulb. And in fact, an alum, this one over here, the Star of Persia, is one that I think I have in my garden. And I walked past the other day. Now it's completely dormant. The foliage is all gone. The flowers are spent. It was blooming really pretty, let's say June or July. And I walked past the other day and I looked down and it looked like I had garlic cloves laying on the ground. And I thought, well, no, that's just the strangest thing. So I look around and there's no evidence of any digging. And then I picked one of the little cloves up and it has little teeth marks in it. So I had a little rodent who had come and dug up my bulb and started eating one of the little cloves of the alum. And so I kept the other cloves, and they still have a little basal plate to them. So I'm going to replant those. Maybe the problem was I didn't have them planted deep enough, or it's just I had a hungry little critter in my yard who was thinking he wanted to eat some onion type plant. Anyhow, so the two of these are just really pretty additions. The Star of Persia will get tall. It gets very tall, and I love it because it can stand up higher than a lot of other plants that you can underplant with them. Alum, the Graceful Beauty here, a really, really pretty flower. Again, it looks large here, but that flower head is only about 3 inches across. And so plant in mass if you plant them. One or two are not going to add much emphasis to your garden, but if you can plant 10 or 15 or 20, I think you'll get a good impact from that plant. Asiatic lily, these are so pretty. We all have varieties. Everybody has different varieties. This one happens to be Patricia's Pride or Purple Rain, and you can kind of see where it gets the Purple Rain name. Very pretty. Another one that our Master Gardener Association has sold, and it's just a very nice addition to the garden. And so consider Asiatic lilies in addition to your other bulb types. These Asiatic lilies do require a lot of 6 to 8 hours of sunlight, and they will bloom in late spring. They are non-tunicate bulbs. They have a really pretty leaf structure. So here on the right, I have some orange Asiatic lilies in my garden, and I pulled some baby stems out. Now their foliage, even though they bloomed in late spring and they were a really pretty addition to the garden, their foliage is still active in the garden, collecting nutrients from the sun, driving it down to the bulb. Here you can see their little bulbettes on the sides of these lily stems. And you could actually, they each have their own little root structure. So you could actually pick those little bulbettes out. And those will have the exact DNA as that Asiatic lily. And you can propagate those little bulbs. Rain lily, this is one of my most favorite additions to my garden. And if I had my way, I would have 10 or 15 different varieties. A lot of people don't think of rain lilies, don't even know that rain lilies are a great addition to a garden. But what's really fun about a rain lily is that when the barometric pressure changes, typically when we're getting to, having a rainstorm of some sort, it will force the bulb to send up a bloom shoot. And some lilies are more apt to bloom in rain lilies will be more apt to bloom in August, September, October timeframe, and then others will just get confused and may bloom in the spring, summer, and fall. So everybody I talk to says, well, mine bloom in the spring. Well, mine bloom in the summer. Well, mine bloom when it doesn't rain. Well, it may be that they bloom when it doesn't rain. It just is the barometric pressure that triggers them to send up the flower stems. So there's no guarantee when they're going to bloom, and that's what's so neat about them. Here I'm going to show you the progression. Here are some seeds. These are right from the seed pod off of the spent bloom, and that came from right behind the bloom. These are from my garden, and so right here, way over here on the right side of your screen, you'll see a flower stalk. And that seed pod came from right behind that flower bloom. a friend of mine gave me some rain lily seedlings in a pot and said, here, these are beautiful, you'll enjoy them. So here's a beautiful little pink one. I've heard people say they have apricot ones. Some people say that they multiply too quickly and they throw their seeds and that they're a nuisance to the garden. So far, I've not had that problem. Here are two that I dug up, and you can see the bulbets and the offsets on the sides of the bulb. And again, it looks as if they have their own root structure. So you could then share that one with your friend and they would get more satisfaction quicker, maybe next spring. And then there's a big white one here. And I only have small clumps of different types, and I'm anxious for them all to multiply. But again, what I have brought with me today, and I'm going to make another mess, is I brought a clump of the sweet little pink one. And it looks like garlic chives. And most people would think it would to be garlic or society garlic or something like that, the green foliage. But look at this clump. Now in here are probably 100 rain lily bulbs, and they're going to be all different sizes. So you could just wiggle some out, and you can see here is a tiny, tiny one, size of, a pea. And then here is one, look at those nice roots on that. And here's one that's about the size of an olive. So easy way to propagate these is just to pull them apart and spread them out in your garden, share them with your friends. Here is another one, and you can see the offsets attached. I'm sorry, I'm going the wrong way. Attached. Isn't that cool? And you can just wiggle those offsets off and separate them out and make for lots more rain lilies in your garden and share with your friends. And in fact, that clump only shoots up a few blooms, and it may be that those that they really need to be divided. You can switch my screen here. So yeah, so that's really, really unique, and I probably will divide those and spread them around my garden. So we'll get back to our presentation. So here is a really unique plant. I know several people who have it now, master gardeners and garden club members, because I've either shared it or somebody else has shared it with them. Not native to this area, not native to this area is African false hosta. It is a non-tunicate bulb. It is also in the lily family. So even though it says false hosta, it is not in the hosta family. It's in the lily family. What's really unique about this bulb is it multiplies very quickly, mostly from offsets, and it does send out a bloom shoot that's really unique. It doesn't have a flower on it per se that is noticeable to the eye, but it's a green and white bloom shoot, and it will have seeds on that after it has matured, and we'll drop those seeds. But it also has a lot of offsets, as you can see from this picture here. As it starts to come out of the ground in February and March, we'll have black dots all over the leaves, which is really neat, and it catches your eye as you're walking through your garden. As it matures, the dots fade. It's just opposite of us humans, because our dots get darker as we get older. But it makes for a lovely ground cover accent in a shade garden. It can only handle the shade garden. Easy to divide. Bulbs are right at the surface. You can almost just pick them out of the ground yourself and share them. Oxblood lily. This is a fall blooming lily. Just absolutely amazing. Even though it's called a lily, it is in the amaryllis family, and it is a tunicate bulb. And you can see here in this picture of mass bulbs, you can see where there are scales and tunicates on there. I'm just a beginner with these, and you can see over here on the right side, somebody was not just a beginner, and they have a beautiful border of these. And I do have Master Gardener friends who have these in their garden, and they do look like this. I've always suggested that I could come thin them out for them, and I have not had any takers at this time. Another fall blooming is something that's blooming right now. It's the Lycoris radiata is the red one here, and it's called a surprise lily, and it really is quite the surprise, because just as the end of the summer is rounding out and you just feel like everything is spent in your garden, these shoots come out of the ground and they produce these beautiful flowers that look like they have fake eyelashes, and they're just absolutely beautiful. I only have the red ones in my garden, and I will tell you the ones that got more sun during the summer bloom first, and I have some in other spots that do not get sun, and they have not bloomed, even sent their bloom stalk up so far this year, but they will. I have faith in them, and so that's kind of nice because they're in different places in the garden and I can enjoy them over time. You can find lots of cultivars of this. This one is the golden spider lily, absolutely beautiful. And you can find them if you look hard enough. And I recommend them because it's such a nice addition to have something bloom in September. Crinum lilies. And where I thought daffodils were the bulb that would last forever, apparently in the South, the crinum lily is the lily that will last for years and years and years. And they used to plant these in cemeteries to honor the people who have passed. And they're still huge clumps, maybe 50 to 60, 70 years old, that are in those cemeteries. So that's why they call them cemetery lilies. There are different varieties. I will tell you that these are very difficult to dig. If you have a very mature clump that has been in place for a long time, some of those bulbs can be 6 inches across at the base, maybe bigger than that. Their roots are all very entangled and twined with each other, and very difficult to dig them up in most soils, possibly not in a sandy soil, but you may have to sacrifice a few bulbs with a shovel to get other bulbs out of the ground, and a great bulb addition to your garden. I hope you all have learned a lot about bulbs. Appreciate your time. You can always reach out to us at Texas Master Gardeners, Tarrant County Association. You can Google us and ask us questions, or maybe come visit us at an event sometime soon. Thank you.